Domo Pava! Here I am, back at it again with a new camera that I barely understand. So real quick, this is most likely going to be my last Bokupre discussion video until May. I might make some other videos related to it, but I'm not going to discuss it. That is in part due to the fact that the DVD for part 3 will not be available until May, and in part due to the fact that I have already made 3 Bokupre videos and somehow didn't get shot on site. I think it has gotten to the point where Marvelous has put a target on my back and they're just waiting to pull the trigger. I do plan to talk more about the series, but it's going to be put on hold for the time being. Thank you for understanding. So I managed to watch the last show, and while I am absolutely horrible at Japanese, I managed to understand approximately 70% of it. And I have a lot on my mind because of it. Now, as promised, this review will be spoiler-free. I'm going to attempt to withhold details about anything that happens in the show. I may show some stock photos, but I promise that they will not reveal much of what occurs. I am willing to discuss in detail what happens in the comments, but all I ask is that you all indicate when you are discussing spoilers in the comments to be fair to those who haven't seen the show yet. This review will, however, assume that you have already watched the first and second show, so please proceed with caution if you haven't. If you're wondering if I'm going to make a spoiler-based review in the future, the answer is no. And that's because I have a lot to say. I could wait, I could make another video, but I have too much to say, and I swear Marvelous has their eyes on me. Originally, I wasn't going to script this and just turn my camera on and start spitballing for 70 minutes, but the more I plan this video, the more I realize just how much I have to say. So I'm back with another scripted video because I care too much about this stupid stage play. Sorry, it's not stupid, it just ruined my fucking life. So to conclude this extended preface, I want to make it absolutely clear that I had an absolute blast watching 3. It was a great experience that I think would only be made better had I watched it live. I love this show just like I love the series, so please understand that everything I'm going to say is because I love Bokupre. I really do care about this show, which is why I have the thoughts that I do. So let's start off with the positives. I'm going to try my best to keep these thoughts my own, but something I see a lot of people say that I can fully agree with is that this show is really well written. I think it is objectively the best writing in the entire series. So I think those who haven't seen it yet are in for a really great story. The visuals are fucking phenomenal. They built a new stage for this show, which allowed for them to pull off visuals that weren't possible in the first 2 shows. The practical and digital effects were also really well done, and it really feels like the team really stepped up their game with this one. The Stella dancers did an absolutely amazing job helping sell the magical aspects of the show and played all of their roles well. Speaking of acting, everyone did a great job. It was very clear that everyone, including those in smaller roles, were giving their all for this performance, and I think that's what made the experience so special. I'd say Shogo Tamada and Masataka Nakagauchi especially so. They sell their performances so well, it practically carries the show. Not to sell everyone else short, the entire cast did really well, but looking back on it, I enjoyed these 2 the most. Also, Miyu Irino lends his voice for the character Duet, and he sounds great. The way they handled his presence on the stage was really well done. I really enjoyed it, and I think first-time watchers will as well. Fans of the Otagiris will be happy to know that they make a minor return in this installment. For fan service reasons. And only fan service reasons. Miroi's return is very similar in that regard. Now, to be clear, I liked it. I very much enjoyed the fans. I very much enjoyed the fan service. I'm not going to sit here and pretend it was the worst experience of my life, because it wasn't. I was very happy to see the characters again. I just wish they had a little more involvement with the plot, but I'll get to that in a moment. I want to let you all know that there is a miracle light moment in the show, so if you have a pen light or something similar, bring it with you on your watch. It is an experience enhancer. And to be clear, I'm not the biggest fan of miracle lights, yet I really liked participating in this show. I highly recommend it. I personally cried when it happened, but I'm too attached to these guys, so that might be a me problem. Also, this is more of an aside, but I don't know if they'll show this in the DVD, but at the end of the last performance, they announced Bokupre party. Side note, do not watch the party announcement if you care about spoilers. I did that and my blood ran cold. Don't do it. Don't watch the party announcement if you care about spoilers. But it was amazing to watch it in the broadcast because you can literally hear everyone in the audience surprised when the projector screen came down. And the absolute joy that erupted in the theater when the party logo showed up was amazing. I had never felt so connected with strangers before. For those who don't know, it was clarified in the middle of October that the climax was going to be the last show, and it sucked. Everyone was expecting it to be over after 3, so Party was an extremely pleasant surprise. It's just an event, the story is officially over, but it was really great to learn that they weren't just going to shelve the characters after this. Again, I don't know if they're going to show the announcement in the DVD, but I recommend watching until the credits because that experience alone was amazing. Personally, the ending reminded me of Adolescence of Utena, Yes, Pretty Cure 5, and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. My only experience with Utena is the movie, but I think if you're a fan of any of these, then you'll like the ending of the show too. Even if not, I still think it was really well done, so there's probably a chance that you'll like it. I had a really great time watching this show in its entirety, and I ended the broadcast with the purest smile on my face. I wouldn't trade that experience for anything, really. And yet, within my enjoyment of this installment, there was an underlying disappointment. I never felt this way with the other 2 shows before, so I had to step back and take that in. Why is something I love so much this disappointing to me? And eventually I realized there's actually a lot of reasons, but essentially, my problem is that the show is compressed as fuck. Even more so than the first one, which was shorter by approximately 30 minutes. Let me try and break it down. Part 3 has an A plot and a B plot. The A plot is what we see the most of and is about Gaku. The B plot we see less of and is about Patadu. The A plot delves into Gaku's psyche and internal conflict. Fun fact, for those who watched my theory video, I was wrong. Very confidently wrong. I mean, I speculated I was incorrect about the who, but as for the how, oh my god. Apparently, I was a complete fool to try and break down Gaku's character to understand his backstory, because as it turns out, 90% of it was irrelevant. Now, Gaku's story was good, very well written, never going to deny that, but I don't think it was perfect, and that's in part related to other issues I had with the show, and in part due to the fact that depression is a bitch, both in experience and in writing. It's not really something that can be understood through words, and therefore makes it something very difficult to portray. I don't think this is a problem on Yu Hasaka's part. I think he did a really good job. I just would have handled it differently. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Starting off with this show's brand new evil depressed teen, Taiyo Asabuki. If you're surprised by that, I don't know what to tell you. There's one in every single show. It was obvious that Taiyo was going to be a little evil. It was advertised for about a full month that Taiyo Asabuki and Gaku Hoshikawa have some sort of relationship with each other. And the show does go ahead and explain how so, but I promise you, whatever you think their relationship is, you're wrong. Because Taiyo Asabuki is nobody. We do get time alone with him, and the show does take the time to establish his relationship with Gaku, but it burns through his story so quickly that it practically doesn't mean anything. Gaku's relationship with Taiyo gets sidelined for the sake of the narrative, and his connection gets severed as soon as we learn who Taiyo is. It's less that Gaku and Taiyo have a connection with each other, but a connection to the concept of each other. Now, this could work the same way it did with Maido in the Otagiris, but Taiyo's presence in the A-plot is so minimal that it doesn't bear the same weight or significance as the sequel. But that's another thing with the characters that's not just a problem with Taiyo Asabuki. Again, I'm trying to keep these thoughts my own, but I saw someone say that it felt like a lot of the characters got sidelined, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was true. The original trio do very little in the A-plot, to the point where they actively take a step back from the action for the sake of the narrative. And with this being the last show, I just want to say that if you're a fan of Maido Kurose, I'm so sorry. He's not even my favorite character, and even I know they underutilized him. And I'm sorry to say it, but when it comes to Moroi, the most significant thing he does is fan service. The majority of this story is character feeling thing, and everyone commenting on how that character feels. The only one who does anything about it is Clown, making him the most proactive character in the A-plot. And that's not really a good thing. Sure, the villains were proactive in the last two shows, but so were the heroes. In the first show, Gaku was actively trying to help solve problems that Moroi was causing. Meanwhile, the sequel was a lot more character-based, so it focused on their internal conflicts and how they related to each other. In the third show, Clown is the only one who does anything about the character's emotions, being the only reason the plot can move forward. And most of Gaku's actions are because of Clown, which weakens the agency he very much had in the first two shows. And it really doesn't help the fact that Clown has a much stronger connection to the B plot than the A plot. And then there's Gaku and Hayato's relationship. I really do like the scenes of them in this show, but I feel like it actually did their relationship a disservice. Gaku and Hayato's relationship was already very well established since the start of the series, but instead of expanding upon what they already created, the show decides to reestablish their relationship, which warped what I understood of their friendship. And I don't mean that in a good way. Part 3 takes the time to show us more moments of their friendship, but in doing so, I personally feel they made their relationship weaker for the sake of making it stronger. It worked with Sasuna and Koga in part 2 because by the time the series decides to start exploring their relationship, we genuinely do not know much about the two. But Gaku and Hayato's friendship, this very well-established friendship that we already saw a good 5 hours of, felt weaker in this show for the sake of the narrative. Let me talk about the narrative real quick. I said so earlier, but a lot of characters, including the original trio, get sidelined to sell this narrative that the conflict is something that only Gaku and Hayato can solve. Which is bullshit. We have been shown how much these characters mean to each other in every part of the series. Yet there is a push for this idea that this is an issue for only Gaku and Hayato. Literally how? Did I misunderstand the rest of this series? You know, the one that showed us that none of the characters could solve their problems on their own and they all needed each other if they wanted to get better. You can break this group up however you want. That doesn't change the fact that they are a team. I would be more lenient if that's just how it turned out, but no, it doesn't even happen naturally. They say it out loud, and then it suddenly makes everyone be a full team again, and it's like they wanted to have their cake and eat it too. But all of this leads back into my original point about Gaku's backstory. This is going to be very bold of me to say, but I don't think this was planned. At least not that far back. I said earlier that I was a complete fool to try and break down Gaku's character to understand his backstory because, as it turns out, 90% of it was irrelevant. That's because they explain everything in this show. And I mean everything. You know how the first show kept mentioning Koga's relationship with the Tengen Shrine, and then in the sequel, we go to the Tengen Shrine? We don't get that here. Instead of things coming together in bits and pieces across the three shows, roughly 99% of Gaku's backstory is in the third show. There is very little in the first two shows that connects to this story. And the references part 3 makes to part 1 don't feel like full circle moments, but just simple references. Gaku is the protagonist. We shouldn't be learning everything about him in the final part of the series. And I was doing my best to be fair and try to understand if I was just upset that my theory was wrong. I even considered that maybe that was the point. That it was always meant to be this difficult to read his character, and Hosaka is this super clever writer who has surpassed me in every plane of existence ever. But then I thought about it more, and no. Hosaka has written subtlety in this series before. He's really good at it. But I could tell that was intentional because it enhanced my experience on my rewatches. But when it comes to Gaku, with there being a severe lack of connection to his backstory in the first two shows, the majority of it being explained in the third, and his relationships being reestablished, it feels like they didn't start planning his backstory until much later in the series production. And if you want to see what I mean, whether you already watched the third show or are watching it later, go ahead and watch the first 3 minutes of part 1. I checked myself, that is all you need. You will see exactly what I mean. Part 3 also goes by really fast. About a quarter of the way through, the show goes into hyperdrive and does not allow itself to breathe again until after the final battle. And I can properly attest to that because I decided to do a time comparison. There is a Yes 5 moment in part 3. I could probably name it something else, but the moment in question actually first happened in Yes 5, so I'm calling it the Yes 5 moment. Hopefully that is vague enough for all of you. Minus all of the buildup, the original moment in Yes 5 was roughly 10 minutes long. Granted, that is not a lot of time, and I realized just how fast the moment was when I rewatched it, but the show refuses to pick up the pace again until the moment passes. The Yes 5 moment in Bokupre 3 was 2 minutes long. 10 minutes isn't a lot, but 2 minutes is nothing. This is a constant for most of the A-plot, making the epic moments feel lackluster and the dramatic moments feel featherweight. And I noticed that the B-plot had a very similar problem with its scenes going by really quickly, but I feel like they were handled a lot better. And I ended up realizing it's because the B plot was answering a question that was raised in the first show and expanded upon in the second show. And while the B plot scenes were not much longer than the A plot scenes, it felt a lot less rushed because they only make sense if you watch the first two shows. The A plot's conflict mostly surrounds part 3 and part 3 only. I feel like a lot of my problems with this show would have been solved if it wasn't the conclusion. This isn't necessarily a bad installment. Again, it is very well written, but I feel like a lot of the problems are in part due to this being the last show. Bokupre being a trilogy makes it the length of approximately 20 Pretty Cure episodes. That's less than half a season. If Bokupre 3 was actually the 4th or maybe the 5th show, it probably would have worked better. That still wouldn't make it the length of a full season, but it would have helped with the compression. They could have made a show about Maido or Sasuna while sprinkling in more details on Gaku and maybe Hayato, and then have the plot pick up at the very start of the next one. It would help space everything out properly and make everything feel a lot less compressed. I always thought they needed to make 5 shows to tell the full story, and part 3 only solidified that for me. Theater isn't my forte, so if any of you know why they decided to make this a trilogy instead of a 4-part or 5-part series, I would love to hear it, because I genuinely do not understand why they thought that was a good idea. I did really enjoy this installment, and I think it was a great addition to the series, but it was by no means the best show. I wish it didn't end here, not just because I don't want to say goodbye to the series, but because it doesn't feel like it's reached its full potential. I might change my opinion when Party goes live, but I think the best installment of the series is actually part 2. It's so much better balanced compared to the other shows. All the characters are important for the story, and nearly everything lands, both in drama and in epicness. I think I said everything I wanted to say. Those were my thoughts on the 3rd show. If you watched it, I'd love to hear yours, and if you haven't watched it yet, please don't be discouraged by me. There wasn't really a perfect installment in this series, and I still had a great time despite my problems. I'm now going to take a break from Bokupre, but I promise I'll be back again with some pretty great stuff. See you soon.